أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم من همزه ونفخه ونفثه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today's topic is going to be, today's questions are going to be, how are you? How's your week been so far? How did you decide what you wanted to do this week, especially when you had many options to choose from? How does this, meaning, first of all, the number of choices that you have to make, or from which you have to choose, and how you make the decision, impact your satisfaction with your choice? And how does this connect with contentment, this process? This is the same thing as last time. However, I did add a few more things just for your reference so you can have a better overall picture of how it also connects to today's videos, inshallah. But it also focusing on how to simplify things for people. So again, this is a person who reaches out to you. They're having, difficulty. They're at a crossroads. They don't know what to do in their life. They find themselves unable to decide as to what they need to do. So there are so many choices because of so much information they have acquired or have been given. How can they navigate this dilemma? What would you do in terms of resolving this? How can you help them simplify the decision-making process? What are some possible reasons why this person is overwhelmed at this crossroads? Or crossroad. Yeah. So this is good then. One of the comments was, I feel like this riddle is the riddle of my life, essentially, every day, huh? So yeah, it is something that a lot of people are struggling with, actually. So that's one of the reasons I brought it up. Okay, so let's see if we have. I'll give you like a few more seconds to just kind of scan it, just for you to have it primed in your head. Okay, so let us continue. And remember the transformation process. Remember breaking big things down into chunks. Remember to be honest with yourself. Remember to be very clear in where you want to go. Sometimes you're gonna find some more details as you go along, but remember to be flexible in that, because although you're gonna have a plan based on the best of your ability and all that, it may not actually be the reality tomorrow. So you might have to adjust, but it's okay, because the first thing is just to have a map, a plan. Okay, so but it has to be detailed. And as you find new information, you just adjust and adapt accordingly. So be open to that. Don't think that you're gonna get exactly where you wanted to go, but you're gonna find so much as on the journey. You can learn so much. You're gonna keep adjusting accordingly, but that's okay. That's part of the process. And then just some things to look over as we go. That the idea of discipline is very important here again, because that's the idea we were talking about. Optimizing, as you're going along. The more you learn, the new things that you learn about, new realizations, new experiences, is going to help you adjust to figure out, to kind of more fine tune the direction you're heading into, the processes you're using, and so on. And remember to have a bigger purpose and have a fluid mindset and have realistic expectations and have have meaning behind things and stuff. Okay, so for games, somebody pick one.
The one on the left?
Okay. Making choosing easier. Okay.
Do you know how many choices you make in a typical day? Do Do you know how many choices you make in a typical week? I recently did a survey with over 2,000 Americans, and the average number of choices that the typical American reports making is about 70 in a typical day. There was also recently a study done with CEOs in which they followed CEOs around for a whole week. And these scientists simply documented all the various tasks that these CEOs engaged in and how much time they spent engaging in making decisions related to these tasks. And they found that the average CEO engaged in about 139 tasks in a week. Each task was made up of many sub-choices, of course. 50% of their decisions were made in 9 minutes or less. Only about 12% of the decisions did they make in an hour or more of their time. Think about your own choices. Do you know how many choices make it into your 9-minute category versus your 1-hour category? How well do you think you're doing at managing those choices? Today I want to talk about one of the biggest modern-day choosing problems that we have, which is the choice overload problem. I want to talk about the problem and some potential solutions. Now, as I talk about this problem, I'm going to have some questions for you, and I'm going to want to know your answers. So when I ask you a question, since I'm blind, only raise your hands if you want to burn off some calories. Otherwise, when I ask you a question, and if your answer is yes, I'd like you to clap your hands. So for my first question for you today, are you guys ready to hear about the choice overload problem? Thank you. So when I was a graduate student at Stanford University, I used to go to this very upscale grocery store. At least at that time, it was truly upscale. It was a store called Traeger's. Now this store, it was almost like going to an amusement park. They had 250 different kinds of mustards and vinegars and over 500 different kinds of fruits and vegetables and more than 24 different kinds of bottled water. And this is during a time when we actually used to drink tap water. I used to love going to this store, but on one occasion, I asked myself, well, how come we never buy anything? Oh, here's their olive oil aisle. They had over 75 different kinds of olive oils, including those that were in a locked case that came from 1,000-year-old olive trees. So I one day decided to pay a visit to the manager, and I asked the manager, you know, is this model of offering people all this choice really working? And he pointed to the busloads of tourists that would show up every day, with cameras ready usually. We decided to do a little experiment. And we picked jam for our experiment. Here's their jam aisle. They had 348 different kinds of jam. We set up a little tasting booth right near the entrance of the store. We either put out 6 different flavors of jam or 24 different flavors of jam. And we looked at 2 things. First, in which case were people more likely to, stop, sample some jam? More people stopped when they were 24, about 60%, than when there were 6, about 40%. The next thing we looked at is in which case were people more likely to buy a jar of jam. And now we see the opposite effect. Of the people who stopped when they were 24, only 3% of them actually bought a jar of jam. Of the people who stopped when they were 6, well, now we saw that 30% of them actually bought the jar of jam. Now, if you do the math, people were at least 6 times more likely to buy a jar of jam if they encountered 6 than if they encountered 24. Now, choosing not to buy a jar of jam is actually probably good for us. At least it's good for our waistlines. But it turns out that this choice overload problem affects us even in very consequential decisions. We choose not to choose even when it goes against our best self-interests. So now for the topic of today, financial savings. This is a study that I did with now I'm going to describe to you a study I did with Gur Huberman, Amir Kaminica, Wei Zhang, where we looked at the retirement savings decisions of nearly 1 million Americans from about 650 plants, all in the US. And what we looked at was whether the number of fund offerings available in a retirement savings plan, the 401k plan, does that affect people's likelihood to save more for tomorrow? And what we found was that indeed there was a correlation. So in these plans, we had about 657 plans that ranged from offering people anywhere from 2 to 59 different fund offerings. And what we found was that the more funds offered, indeed there was less participation rates. So if you look at the extremes, those plans that offered you 2 funds, participation rates were around in the mid-70s, still not as high as we want it to be. In those plans that offered nearly 60 funds, participation rates have now dropped to about 60 percentile. Now, it turns out that even if you do choose to participate when there are more choices present, even then it has negative consequences. So for those people who did choose to participate, the more choices available, the more likely people were to completely avoid stocks or equity funds. The more choices available, the more likely they were to put all their money in pure money market accounts. Now, neither of these extreme decisions are the kinds of decisions that any of us would recommend for people when you're considering their future financial well-being. Well, over the past decade, we have observed 3 main negative consequences to offering people more and more choices. They're more likely to delay choosing, procrastinate, even when it goes against their best self-interest. They're more likely to make worse choices, worse financial choices, medical choices. They're more likely to choose things that make them less satisfied, even when they do objectively better. The main reason for this is because, well, we might enjoy gazing at those giant walls of mayonnaises, mustards, vinegars, jams, but we can't actually do the math of comparing and contrasting and actually picking from that stunning display. So what I want to propose to you today are 4 simple techniques that we have tested in one way or another in different research venues that you can easily apply in your businesses. The first, cut. You've heard it said before, but it's never been more true than today, that less is more. People are always upset when I say cut. They're always worried they're going to lose shelf space. But in fact, what we're seeing more and more is that if you are willing to cut, get rid of those extraneous, redundant options, well, there's an increase in sales. There's a lowering of costs. There's an improvement of the choosing experience. When Procter & Gamble went from 26 different kinds of Head & Shoulders to 15, they saw an increase in sales by 10%. When the Golden Cat Corporation got rid of their 10 worst-selling cat litter products, they saw an increase in profits by 87%, a function of both increase in sales and lowering of costs. You know, the average grocery store today offers you 45,000 products. The typical Walmart today offers you 100,000 products. But the ninth largest retailer, the 9th biggest retailer in the world today is Aldi's, and it offers you only 1,400 products, one kind of canned tomato sauce. Now, in the financial savings world, I think one of the best examples that has recently come out on how to best manage the choice offerings has actually been something that David Laipson was heavily involved in designing, which is a program that they have at Harvard. Every single Harvard employee is now automatically enrolled in the Life Cycle Fund. For those people who actually want to choose, they're given 20 funds, not 300 or more funds. You know, often people say, I don't know how to cut. They're all important choices. And the first thing I do is I ask the employees, tell me how these choices are different from one another. And if your employees can't tell them apart, neither can your consumers.
How can you use that personally in your own lives? That specific aspect that she mentioned over here just now. How are they different from each other? And if you really can't give substantial answers, then, you know, that maybe they're not so different.
Now, before we started our session this afternoon, I had a chat with Gary. And Gary said that he would be willing to offer people in this audience an all-expenses paid free vacation to the most beautiful road in the world. Here's a description of the road, okay, and I'd like you to read it, and now I'll give you a few seconds to read it, and then I want you to clap your hands if you're ready to take Gary up on his offer.
Okay, so really quick, there's a particular road, it's extremely beautiful, with gorgeous mountains, cliffs, and greenery. While the road offers dramatic scenery, this combination of extremely narrow roads and tall cliffs have led some to consider it the most dangerous road in the world. And now there is a note at the bottom, an average of 2 vehicles per month fall from the road. And then it continues, the danger of the road, ironically, though, has made it a popular tourist destination starting in the 1990s. Mountain biker enthusiasts in particular have made it a favorite destination for exhilarating downhill biking.
Okay? Anybody who's ready to take him up on his offer? Is that all? All right, let me show you some more about this. You guys knew there was a trick, didn't you? Now who's ready to go on this trip? I think I might have actually heard more hands. All right. Now, in fact, you had objectively more information the first time around than the second time around, but I would venture to guess that you felt that it was more real the second time around because the pictures made it feel more real to you. Which brings me to the second technique for handling the choice overload problem, which is concretization. That in order for people to understand the differences between the choices, they have to be able to understand the consequences associated with each choice, and that the consequences need to be felt in a vivid sort of way, in a very concrete way. Why do people spend an average of 15 to 30% more when they use an ATM card or a credit card as opposed to cash? Because it doesn't feel like real money. And it turns out that making it feel more concrete can actually be a very positive tool to use in getting people to save more. So a study that I did with Shlomi Benartzi and Alessandro Privatero, we did a study with people at ING, employees that are all working at ING. And now these people were all in a session where they're doing enrollment for their 401k plan. And during that session, we kept the session exactly the way it used to be, but we added one little thing. The one little thing we added was we asked people to just think about all the positive things that would happen in your life if you saved more. By doing that simple thing, there was an increase in enrollment by 20%, and there was an increase in the amount of people that were willing to save, in terms of the amount that they were willing to put down into their savings account by 4%. The third technique, categorization. You know, we can handle more categories than we can handle choices. So, for example, here's a study we did in a magazine aisle. Turns out that in Wegmans grocery stores up and down the Northeast corridor, the magazine aisles range anywhere from 331 different kinds of magazines versus all the way up to 664. But you know what? If I show you 600 magazines and I divide them up into 10 categories, versus I show you 400 magazines and divide them up into 20 categories, you believe that I have given you more choice and a better choosing experience if I gave you the 400 than if I gave you the 600. Because the categories tell me how to tell them apart. Here are two different jewelry displays. One is called jazz, the other one is called swing. I think the display on the left is swing and the display on the right is jazz. Clap your hands. There's some. If you think the one on the left is jazz and the one on the right is swing, clap your hands. Okay, a bit more. Okay? Now it turns out you're right. The one on the left is jazz and the one on the right is swing. But you know what? This is a highly useless categorization scheme. You know, the categories need to say something to the chooser, not the choice maker. And you often see that problem when it comes down to those long lists of all these funds. Who are they actually supposed to be informing? My fourth technique, condition for complexity. It turns out we can actually handle a lot more information than we think we can. We just got to take it a little easier. We got to gradually increase the complexity. I'm going to show you one example of what I'm talking about. Let's take a very, very complicated decision, buying a car. Here's a German car manufacturer that gives you the opportunity to completely custom make your car. You're going to make 60 different decisions, completely make up your car. Now, these decisions vary in the number of choices that they offer per decision. Car colors, exterior car colors, I've got 56 choices. Engine, gear shift, 4 choices. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to vary the order in which these decisions appear. So half of the customers are going to go from high choice, 56 car colors, to low choice, 4 gear shifts. The other half of the customers are going to go from low choice, 4 gear shifts, to 56 car colors, high choice. What am I going to look at? how engaged you are. If you keep hitting the default button per decision, that means you're getting overwhelmed. That means I'm losing you. What you find is the people that go from high choice to low choice, they're hitting that default button over and over and over again. We're losing them. They go from low choice to high choice, they're hanging in there. It's the same information. It's the same number of choices. The only thing that I have done is I have varied the order in which that information is presented. If I start you off easy, I learn how to choose. Even though choosing gear shift doesn't tell me anything about my preferences for interior decor, it still prepares me for how to choose. It also gets me excited about this big product that I'm putting together, so I'm more willing to be motivated to be engaged. So let me recap. I have talked about 4 techniques for mitigating the problem of choice overload. Cut, get rid of the extraneous alternatives. Concretize, make it real. Categorize, we can handle more categories, less choices. Condition for complexity. All of these techniques that I'm describing to you today are designed to help you manage your choices better for you. You can use them on yourself. Better for the people that you are serving. Because I believe that the key to getting the most from choice is to be choosy about choosing. And the more we're able to be choosy about choosing, the better we will be able to practice the art of choosing. Thank you very much.
You pay in time. You pay in...
Thoughts on this one?
I found it highly relatable. I want to share a quick story that there was this pair of, not a pair, but a set of like really nice baking cups, like what is it, measuring cups and measuring spoons that I really wanted for a long time. And when I mean long, I mean like I spent a solid 2 months just deciding if I wanted to get this set off of Amazon because they were really pretty. They were pink and gold and like, oh, they were just lovely. And I knew I really wanted that set. But what I did was I went to like 4 different stores, compared a million of them in the stores to see if I can get them cheaper than what was on Amazon, or even something similar. And then I looked on like a bunch of websites, and when I was scrolling through Amazon on multiple different days, I was like always going back to this one, but constantly comparing it to other ones. And anytime I would go back to Amazon to compare prices, I would find a different set I didn't see before. And this just stopped me from buying measuring cups for 2 months when I could have just bought a set and would have been fine. What ended up happening is I just ended up ordering the one I initially wanted and just accepting that it was going to be expensive. And I just wanted to invest in something I wanted, and that it was okay. So I had to like justify for myself it was okay to spend that much on the item. But I, at this point, had exhausted myself just trying to look for options.
Yeah.
So it was just too much behind such a simple thing.
Yeah. And you know, this is the exact same thing that happens in many different scenarios. If a person wants to find work somewhere, if a person wants to move somewhere, if a person wants to get married, if a person is trying to do so many different things and stuff, that's just like overwhelming. So for example, whether it's a car decision, whether it's like, you know, which school that you should apply for and stuff or whatever, all of these things can be overwhelming. So for example, in the context of marriage specifically, let's say, if a person wants to get married, they should focus on the hard ask, meaning like whatever they need, right? So that whatever it is, the boundary that they need, like these are the absolute minimum things that they need. Without them, they just cannot live and stuff, right? So you ask us for those things, and then everything else you could say consider as like preferences or soft ask, right? You would like to have them, but if you don't have them, no problem. But you have to really know who you are, what you want and stuff, to be able to have these things, you know, set down. And then the other person should do the same thing, and that makes it a lot easier because maybe you only have really, like if you really think about it, maybe you only have 3 or 4 things that you really are looking for and stuff, and everything else is just sort of extra perks and stuff like that, right? And if you could differentiate between that, then that makes it a lot easier for you to pick people and stuff, right? As opposed to sort of like finding like that unicorn and stuff, right? What I mean by unicorn is like a person so rare and stuff, you're not gonna find them and stuff because they're so customized and stuff in a certain way that person doesn't actually exist in real life and stuff, right? But on the other hand, if you have 3 or 4 things that you're looking for example, and these are the absolute must, then you're gonna find that you have a little bit more possible, you know, like it's a little bit easier for you to make the decision, right? Because you're going to be like, okay, well, I don't have to go around the entire world and stuff. If I get this person, I'm going to miss out on this and this is whatever. So you're going to be it's going to be a little bit easier for you to sort of prioritize and say, these are the things that I'm looking for. You know what, this person I'm talking to meets these requirements, I'm good to go, I can move forward and stuff, right? As opposed to saying, okay, well, this person also, okay, they have this, but they don't have that and stuff. I don't really need this, but it'd be nice to have this and stuff and all that stuff, right? So you're kind of simplifying the process of decision making, because you're saying, okay, well, this person has these 3 things, great, let me go with this and stuff, and I'm good to go. That's it, you're done. But when we add so many different things that we were looking for, then we make it a lot harder for us to actually like settle on certain things and stuff. So differentiating between these things are going to be useful. Categorizing, this is what I need, this is what I would like to have, but if I don't get it, no problem, I'm good with whatever I like. As long as I get whatever I need, the few things that I needed. So likewise for work, for like, you know, for schools and stuff, for majors that you want to pick and stuff, or whatever it is, it's a lot easier to do that then. Just wanted to share these things, this idea too. But yeah, the cup example is a very famous example. If you want to go through a particular training in a particular, you know, field or whatever, you might be looking at like, you know, 50 different offerings and stuff, and you're like, okay, which one do I actually apply for and stuff, and you just sort of like, you know what, I'll make a decision tomorrow. Especially if there's some money involved and stuff like that, you know. So these are things to help you kind of like realize where we're going wrong in decision making and how to simplify that process. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next one? Okay, and by the way, if you remember like the way she mentioned at the end, the kind of like training the person, so going from fewer choices to more choices. So in the very beginning, if you say, okay, these are my absolute needs, then those are going to be fewer, like maybe like 5 or 6 needs, maybe, right? And then that's it. And as you go forward, you can say, you know what, everything else is sort of just extra and stuff, I'm good to go with that. So that's kind of training yourself in that way. So that's what sort of like, you know, going from there, as opposed to saying, what are the things that I would like to have, and then trying to figure out, narrowing it down to what are the things that I need. Okay, so that's where information overload can happen. So just keep those things in mind.
You're probably familiar with Fomo. That's short for fear of missing out. It's that feeling you get when it seems like everyone else is doing something better than what you're doing right now. But there's another foe you need to know about, and it's far more dangerous. It's called Fomo, and it's short for fear of a better option. We live in a world of overwhelming choice. Even decisions that used to be simple, like choosing a restaurant or making everyday purchases, are now fraught with overanalysis. Technology has only made the issue more pronounced. If you want to buy a pair of white shoelaces online, you have to sort through thousands of items and read through hundreds of reviews. That's an astounding amount of information to process. Just buy 2 pieces of string that cost less than your morning latte. Chances are you've experienced Fomo when you struggle to choose just one from a group of perfectly acceptable outcomes. It's a symptom of a culture which sees value in collecting and preserving as many options as possible. You might wonder why all of this is so bad. It seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't it be a privilege to have so many good options to choose from? The problem is, Fomo induces such severe analysis paralysis that it can negatively impact both your personal and your professional life. When you can't make decisions with conviction, you waste precious time and energy. Luckily, there is a way to overcome Fomo.
Now notice some people, for example, if you're like really like well off and stuff, you have a lot of emotions and stuff, right? You might actually say, you know what, I have all this money and stuff, and I want to buy these cars, but you know, if I get this car, I'm gonna miss out on this car, so let me also buy this car and stuff, right? And then you have like maybe like 500 different kind of cars and stuff like that, because you just, you know, you couldn't decide on which one you actually wanted and stuff, right? And most of those cars you probably are not going to drive, you're just sitting there, you're just staring at them and stuff, right? So just some things also to kind of connect with this.
Here's the secret. With any decision you make, you first have to determine the stakes, as this will inform your decision-making strategy. When it comes down to it, you only really face 3 types of decisions in life: high stakes, low stakes, and no stakes. Let's start with no stakes decisions. These are the minor details of life where there is almost never an incorrect answer, and in a few hours you won't even remember making the decision in the first place. A good example of this is choosing what to watch on TV. With thousands of shows, it's easy to get overwhelmed. Yet no matter what you pick, the consequences are basically non-existent. So spending more than a few moments on Fomo is a massive waste of energy. You just need to move on.
So here's something that you can connect on. If you're trying to figure out which gas station to buy, gas in, and you're just thinking like all gas stations are fine and stuff, I can get it from anywhere, but you're just looking for like 1 cent cheaper, and you would drive an extra like 2 miles to get gas because you're going to save 1 cent or 2 cents on this and stuff, right? So you can imagine like how much time you actually invested in there compared to how much money you actually saved. Was your time that you spent, the extra amount of time, worth the amount of money that you saved? If you saved like 12 cents out of this entire experience and you spent like an extra 10 minutes driving or something like that, is your time 10 minutes worth 12 cents? And if it is, then maybe like some more reflection needs to be done. Inshallah, like, you just maybe something to like think about. 12 cents for 10 minutes versus, and I'm not saying, obviously there are people who, in certain parts of the world who are going to have like 12 cents is a lot for them, but I'm talking about in the context of, our time. 12 cents for, if this is like a recurring thing in your life, instead you're spending so much extra time, but your actual benefit that you're getting is very little.
When it comes to no-stakes decisions, the key is to outsource them to the universe. For example, you can
in this case, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right?
whittle down your choices to just 2 and then flip a coin. Or try my personal favorite, ask the watch. Assign each one of your choices to one half of your watch, then let the second hand tell you what you're going to do. Looks like I'll be having the fish. That brings us to low-stakes decisions. These have consequences, but none are earth-shattering, and there are plenty of acceptable outcomes. Many routine things at work, like purchasing a printer, booking a hotel, or choosing between possible venues for an offsite, are classically low stakes in nature. Some thinking is required, but these aren't make-or-break deliberations, and you'll probably have forgotten about them in a few weeks. Here you can also outsource decision-making, but you want some critical thinking involved, as there are some stakes. This time you'll outsource to a person. Set some basic criteria, select someone to present a...
So this is like when we make istikhara, we made istishara first. We consult people and kind of do some research, but we go to people that we believe are going to really be able to help out.
Recommendation, and then take their advice. Make sure to avoid the temptation to canvas. Your goal is to clear your plate.
Imagine if you sat there and you decided that you're going to have 30 different people you could ask, and you're just stuck on which one to go ask first, right? That's another problem that could happen. So just narrow it down. One person, let me just get their perspective. Let me get like 2 or 3 perspectives. Have a upper limit in this case on who you're going to go, and just go with them, because these are people that might give you some guidance, and maybe there's stuff that they might say might help you actually simplify the process even more. You might not need to go to the 4th, or 5th, or 6th, or 50th person.
Not to kick the can down the road. Now that you tackle low stakes and no stakes decisions, you created the space and time you'll need to handle high stakes decisions. These are things like, which house should I buy, or which job should I accept? Since the stakes are high and there are long-term implications, you absolutely want to get it right.
Now, this is the kind of stuff why, for example, there was a mention of how Mark Zuckerberg, when he wears the gray shirts, and I think like just the same kind of like same shirt, same like jeans and stuff, it's same color, same everything every single day, because then he doesn't have to sit there in the morning and trying to figure out like what to do and stuff, because it's such a no stake or low stake decision that he doesn't want to spend, like he doesn't want to lose on that, and he wants to go into that he wants to make sure that he does like the high stake decisions. He does them more effectively, so he does not make decisions in other things like low stake and no stake stuff. He's just gonna sort of allocate outside and say, you know what, clothing is clothing. I don't really care about that because that's not that's not important in my line of work or whatever. I need to focus on the bigger things. So that's why he sort of allocates to that.
Before we get to work, let's establish a few basic principles to guide you through the process. First, think about what really matters to you and set your criteria accordingly. Second, gather the relevant facts. Make sure you collect data about all of the options so you can be confident that you're truly making an informed decision. And third, remember that Fomo by nature comes when you struggle to choose just one from a group of perfectly acceptable options. So no matter what you choose, you can rest assured that the downside is limited. Now that you've established some ground rules, the process can begin. Start by identifying a front runner based on your intuition. Then compare each of your options head to head with the front runner one by one. Each time, choose the better of the two based on the criteria and discard the other one. Here's the trick to avoiding FOMO. When you eliminate an option, it's gone forever. If you keep returning to discarded options, you risk getting stuck. Now repeat this process until you get down to one final choice. If you follow this system, you will usually end up with a decision on your own. On the rare occasion that you get stuck, you will outsource the final decision to a small group of qualified people who you trust and who are equipped to provide you with guidance on this particular.
And this would be considered arbitration in the context of like your work that you're doing. So if, like, let's say, for example, in the context of the dispute between two business partners or husband and wife or whatever, then they allocate to somebody else. Like the wife would appoint somebody from her family, and then the husband would appoint somebody from his family, and then they would they would sit down and they would arbitrate whatever decision that they might come up with. That's what goes. Or at the end of the day, whatever the decision, like one person that's like, the arbitrator that's designated by both people, an outside party, whatever that person decides, then usually that's what happens. And this is typically what happens when it comes to court cases as well. Like there's one judge and that person makes a decision and so on.
Topic. Engage a group of 5 or less, ideally an odd number of people, so that you have a built-in tiebreaker if you need it. Now that you've made your choice, one last challenge remains. You have to commit. I can't promise you that you'll ever truly know if you've made the perfect decision, but I can tell you this. A significant percentage of people in the world will never have to worry about Fomo. Unlike the billions of people who have few options, if any, due to war, poverty, or illness, you have plentiful opportunities to live decisively.
And this is where the idea of first world problems comes in, where a lot of people overseas, when they don't have choices, actually you might find them a lot more content with their life, right? But over here, you find the opposite sometimes.
You may not get everything you want, but the mere fact you get to decide is powerful. In fact, it's a gift. Make the most of it.
You pay in time. You pay.
Okay. Any thoughts on this one?
I think modern society makes life way harder than it needs to be. And unfortunately, you have to actively unsubscribe from that mentality, both digitally and in real life, if you want to be a more simplified, more calm, more effective person. There's probably some correlation between this and how the United States is the most heavily medicated or country, or we have the highest rate of highest rate of inmates prison, percentage of people in prison. That's a whole other topic. But I was just thinking, we have all these huge problems, and the Western world, specifically the U.S., surpasses in all these areas. A lot of it still connects back to, I think, decision making.
And also the confusion, because a lot of times if you have too many philosophies to subscribe to, or if you have no moral guidance and you have no system of morality, then you're just sort of confused because you don't know what's right and wrong. In Islam, at least we have a reference point. Say, okay, this is wrong, we don't do this. So it's a clear cut no, right? That's the boundary. We don't have choices in that area. But then on the other hand, if you are not subscribing to any moral system, it becomes very confusing. But then even before that, if you have to subscribe, if you have 15 different options to choose from, whichever moral system to follow, that can be daunting as well. So Islam, alhamdulillah, it gives us a very simple, sort of straightforward stuff that you could do. Okay, this is okay, this is not okay, and this is a system you have to follow, and there's only one choice and stuff. You don't have 15 different choices in terms of which religion you can accept or whatever. There's just one way, and you just go with it. And then within there's room for making decisions which are not non-critical, and you can choose between different things and stuff like that. Even, for example, if a person's trying to get married, that you can pick pretty much so many different people and stuff. But at the end of the day, when you also when you want to do a business, or there's so many different options you can pick from, but there are some guidance. So there is some guidance that helps you sort of stay, for lack of a better word, sane. You're not getting overwhelmed. Yeah. I'm reading the comments, and yeah. Yeah, so every day, every time, things change over time. So if you're living in a society that's constantly changing, and what your parents thought was sort of the moral system of the day, what was okay politically and stuff, and tomorrow it turns out to be wrong. It was the case that in the past, morally, in the political arena, it was this thing that African Americans or blacks are more inferior for various reasons. In fact, science played a role in there. when they started actually attributing lower intelligence and so on to certain people because of like what was back then the science of its day, the most advanced science of its day. But it actually, now we're looking back and it's like, how in the world did people even think like that and stuff, right? But it was sort of like the political environment and the context and stuff that are, even the presidents, even the Supreme Court backed up some of these things. So in this case, tomorrow something changes and you're sort of like, I was just getting the hang of the system and now everything is different and stuff. So it's so confusing. Everything is just changing every day. It's like different and stuff. So many different choices and stuff. Yeah. So what we have, what we hold as sort of like fixed moral values and stuff are actually not, and they're relative and they keep on changing. So you can see how a society like this will, if it continues in this trend, can get overwhelmed, and things happen in the society that the society starts falling apart. Yeah, and the Supreme Court, in the 1990s, no, 1920s, when Virginia enacted the law of like the sterilization of black women, and this is like the eugenics movement at that time, but it continued onwards, and at one point the Supreme Court actually upheld the law. So it doesn't mean anything in the sense that like if you say that this is the history and it keeps on happening like this because the rules keep on changing, morality keeps on changing and stuff, then maybe today's rules are going to be looked down on tomorrow, because people are going to be like, how in the world the people in 2021 were even considering things like this? Like maybe in the next 10 years you're going to be like, wow, people in 2021 were really backwards and stuff, right? And if that's the case, what we're considering and we're championing as like real causes and like real moral values and stuff and politically correct and stuff may actually be the exact opposite of what it should be and stuff. And so we might be actually advocating harm when we're thinking it's good, and then 10 years from now it's sort of like, oh well, we were actually advocating harm and we thought it was the right thing to do, and then like how many people were hurt in the process. So this is definitely addressing the idea of like having Islam as one thing that we can ascribe to, and it's sort of constant across the timeline, as opposed to other moral systems or the like just relativistic systems that where things change, you're always confused, you always have these options and stuff, and it's just sort of like more and more confusing, more and more overwhelming, and potentially more and more depressing. Okay, so let us go to this one right here. If anybody has any comments on these.
Do you want us to answer the question?
Yeah, if you have any thoughts on the questions, or if you have anything else, any questions about the scenario itself or anything.
Okay, well, I guess I can try to answer this question. Well, first of all, I think it's still a hard question, but I got the idea from maybe what we should have pulled from the videos, generally speaking, like where you can simplify, you should simplify, and determining like, and also trying to eliminate overcomplicating something that's actually simple, so you can invest more energy in actually like objectively more complicated issues, like the whole buying a house, buying a car, marriage, school, job, all that stuff. Those bigger decisions are going to require more energy and more time, and also probably consulting like trusted figures, and will take a longer. This is going to take more time, energy, and people to make a good decision on more complicated issues. But we're going to not have the energy for those things if we're getting exhausted over buying measuring cups. Like that's a very silly thing to be losing so much time and energy over. So with simplifying the decision-making process, maybe for an individual, like if we're still thinking scenario, like someone reaching out to you but not knowing what to do with life, although that's totally me in most cases to other people. But if someone were to reach out to me, that I would just be like, okay, well, let's think about the categories in your life right now. Like what is occupying you education-wise, and make a list, what is occupying you work-wise or job or work-wise, what is occupying you in terms of where you're spending your time doing applications for things, and what is occupying you in your family, and what is occupying you in your being. And if you feel like there are things that overlap a lot, maybe you can cut one or two things out to try to reduce the overall amount of things you might be committing to that might not make sense for you. I think an example maybe for myself was like, I had there was a point where I was doing way too many Islamic classes at the same time, to the point where I really just wasn't benefiting from them anymore. So I had to really just cut it down and decide like, okay, which of these things are substantive for me right now? Which of these can I return to later? Which of them can I actually retain information from and apply to my life, and just stick to a few per week instead? And for me, that was more realistic, because then I was just getting more out of doing less. So I think trying to figure out how to get more out of doing less can be good for your overall well-being. Is that a good answer? I tried.
No, these are good reflections, yes. It's important because a lot of people are struggling with similar things, and so the idea is to brainstorm how we can get, improve. For example, when you focus on the absolute minimum needs that you have, if you know how to differentiate between a need and a want, then that's a really powerful thing. So once you have that idea, then you can move forward and say, okay, well, in that case, I can, do this and this and stuff. So, like, let's say if you had like a need for a car, but your main priority was, okay, it needs to be reliable. I don't want to like keep like, having a breakdown or whatever. And I would like for it to be sort of like, nice looking and stuff and so on, right? And I need to be able to go from place to place, and I have gas or whatever, efficiency stuff or whatever. So you say, okay, well, those are my requirements. Everything else beyond that is sort of like just a perk, like a plus, but it's not necessary. So you might find that, okay, well, most cars actually have in the same like class, in the same like class of, for example, like if it's like a 4-door car, right? Most cars that are 4-door, having a similar engine, are gonna have the same similar gas efficiency. So you're probably gonna have like a difference of like maybe 1 or 2 miles per gallon and stuff, but that's really insignificant in the grand scheme of things and stuff, right? And so you say, okay, well, in that case, it could be any of these cars and stuff, as long as sort of like it's this class of car. I want a 4-door car. It has to be like, mid-size or whatever, and that's it. And then if you know, for example, that you want it to be reliable, well, many cars are going to be sort of reliable in the same range. If you have, like, for example, Honda, or like you have a Toyota or something like that, and these are cars usually that are good, that you can rely on. But there's like you can go to a car dealer and say, okay, well, I'm looking for a car that is mid-size. I'm looking for it to be, like it's reliable. It doesn't break down too often. What kind of cars do you have? They say, okay, well, we have these cars and stuff. Okay, what's the best out of all of them? Okay, we have like the Accords go really well, or like whatever, right? So you say, okay, I'll get an Accord, and that's it. And you go out of it, and you're done, right? Because the main thing was it has to be reliable. Gas efficiency sort of be like similar across the board, and other than that, the other thing was just like it doesn't break down. So you like the cars and stuff. Maybe like the person gives you 3 options, and you go to check out the interiors, and you're like, okay, well, I like out of the 3, I like this one the best and stuff, and I'm good to go. And you walk out with that car and stuff because it has similar reliabilities and stuff, right? Now again, reliability versus interior. If you have reliability is a bigger thing than the interior, then you're gonna be like, okay, well, that's a priority. So if I'm looking at 3 cars, they're sort of the similar. In one case, the third option, the third best car, is they looks nicer inside, but it's not as reliant. But I'm really worried about like reliability. So then I'll go to the second car or the first car and stuff, and then that's it. Like I'll just get that and I'm done. So it makes it a lot easier for you to make decisions. Now, if you sat there and said, okay, well, what about the color? What about like how much leg room it has and stuff in the back and stuff? Because they're the similar class of car, they're not gonna have much difference. But if you really fixate on that, those are not things that are gonna make like big differences in your life. If you sat there and you said, okay, do I know anybody who is who does like mechanic work in this particular brand? If you sat there and you said, okay, for example, you had all these extra things that you really didn't need to consider, but you still thought about them a lot, then in that case, you're not going to really make a decision, or you're not going to be happy with the decision you make. On the other hand, if you limit the number of things that are that are pretty much focused on the things that you need, then everything else you consider as like a waste of time, to sort of like looking at it. If it's not really going to help you much, then you just feel comfortable with whatever decision you make, and you're like, it's okay. I was looking for these things. I got what I was looking for. Everything else was a perk. I didn't get it. It's no big deal because it's not really like it's not important to me. It could have been nice, yeah, but it didn't come, so no problem. Keep moving, and that's it. Any other thoughts?
I think, as you mentioned, just identifying what are the main points for that person, what they need and what they're looking for, or what they need and what they want. I think that's going to be the first step for them. And just sort of sometimes writing things down, or speaking, whatever works better for them, but actually putting it out where they can see it, different pathways to help them see the choices that are in front of them, rather than just having ideas that are floating around in the head, but actually putting it where they can see it and seeing how that lines up with their needs and wants.
Yeah. I think priorities are going to be very, very big. Like, what are the things that you really need, and then just focusing on that. Like, I think so I was listening to a podcast where somebody was saying that they knew somebody who worked with Elon Musk, and they asked, the person who was mentioning this said that, I asked, like, well, how does Elon Musk make decisions? And the answer was that, well, any decision, anything that was brought up to him, if it's not connected to making the world more like the world using more sustainable energy, then he just doesn't like go with that. He just goes with. Obviously, I don't know if this is true or not and stuff, but this was mentioned in that podcast with a particular group of people. So the idea was, if something is going to make sustainable energy more of a thing, and it's going to be like, this is something that's going to make it more common in the world, then the answer is yes. If no, then the answer is no. Everything else is sort of just arbitrary. So it's like very clear, sort of like, this is the one thing that I am prioritizing. Everything else is sort of like not really beneficial. So I'm not going to make a decision regarding that. So if this is true, this is a simple way of saying, hey, this is the most important thing. Everything else is just there, but it's irrelevant to my decision making process. It doesn't really like impact me much. Like if you got this bowl or you got this other bowl, like a measuring cup or whatever, if you got this one or this one, they still measure the same thing. One of them might be see-through, well, the other one might be see-through as well. The third one might be see-through too, so that doesn't really do anything to me, right? And I didn't really care because I didn't really need to like look at a certain thing, for example, maybe. Or maybe like you were just focused on like, maybe like the handle looked a little bit different and stuff, but functionally it didn't really make a difference instead, because I'm only going to use it for like 5 minutes and stuff and I'm done, right? So things like this, like if you say, okay, I just need a measuring cup that measures in cups and liters or whatever, and that's it. If that was the main thing, and if that and all of them did that, then you just arbitrarily pick one, you just go with it and go.
Right. I think it has the person's own tastes are very important. For instance, like a lot of people, if you're just going to do homework, you just grab, if you pick a blue pen or a black pen. But if you have a very artistic mindset, then it may be really important to you what type of pen you're using. So when you're writing, so you wouldn't just pick up any pen that maybe you found on the couch, or you would have a very specific one, and you may spend a little bit more money to get the exact point that you want and the colors, or so yeah, it depends upon the person and what's really important to them, because for one person something is very important, and for another person it seems like it's not even a consideration at all.
Yeah. So everyone should sort of like write down the most important things in terms of like the relevance to whatever they're doing, and the thing that's actually going to have an impact. And then once you know those things, there are going to be very few. And if multiple options are offering the same, they're meeting your requirements and stuff, you might look at one or two extra things and stuff that one of the things might be offering, and then you just press the buy button and you're just done with it and you walk away from it and you save all that time and energy. And if your time is the most valuable thing that you have, then you saved something that was worth a lot more than what you were going to get out of the extra little thing that you might have gotten because you got a smiley face on the box or something like that, right? Any other thoughts? So there's something in the chat. Let's see. Okay. Any other thoughts? Think about why this person might have been in that at that crossroad in the first place.
Why the person was at a crossroads in the first place?
Yeah, that's something to think about. Yeah, just kind of understand the context, like why he might be there or she might be there, why they're having this struggle. So obviously it has to do with overwhelm, but like why do you think they might be at that road, and what therefore could you help them with in terms of helping them navigate? Like let's say that they're trying to decide what major they want to do, or what job they want to do, or when they want to get married or something like that. But like these are crossroads in life; they don't know what to do.
Maybe. Well, I guess the reason for someone being at a crossroads is going to be different from person to person. But I just feel like dealing with any type of transition in life is going to involve feeling like you're at a crossroads, probably. That could be anything from losing a job to graduating from school to, the structure of your family changing. Someone in your house getting divorced. It could be, so many things. It could be like or it could be when you have too many decisions. Like you're applying to college and you got into like 6 different schools. Like, what do you do? So it can be both too many decisions, or it can be being in a place in life where there has to be change and you're not ready for it and don't know how to equip yourself to be ready for it. So I think there's many reasons why a person can be at a crossroads. And I think everyone compensates for what they perceive to be hardships differently. And it's really important to be intuitive enough and self-reflective enough to recognize like what do you compensate with, because other people might look at you and think you're fine because you seem to be productive or just living your day-to-day life, or you actually might even look successful because you're doing a lot. But in reality, you might be doing too much, too often, going way too hard on yourself. And I personally am one of those people that just when I feel stressed, I just do more work, and I don't think that makes any sense. But that's just how I function. Like cleaning and organizing, for example. Like if I can't fix a mess in my life, I'm gonna fix a mess in the house. Like that's just how I do things. But then I'll just be tired, both mentally and physically, by the end of it. Like after I go through the whole thing, like one dish out of place in the kitchen might completely ruin my moment in the day where I already feel frazzled to begin with. And I'm like, can we not just keep one thing in place when I can't think, I can't put anything in place in my head with things that are out of my control. So I guess it's going to be different for everybody. So learning what you're really afraid of can be very important. And I think this can be beneficial for anybody, like writing a list of what are you really, really afraid of, like in millennia, and seeing what those patterns are, and writing out also what are your tools to compensate for where you feel inadequacy, because everybody feels some level of inadequacy, I think, at least at some point in their life, and understanding what do you do to deal with those moments, because you're more likely to feel like you're at a crossroads and don't know what you're doing when you're doing too many things. Or if you get to the point of shutdown where you do nothing, then you'll feel even worse because you feel like I'm not doing anything to deal with whatever I'm feeling challenged by right now. Hope that makes sense. I was a little all over the place.
Yeah, and also sometimes it might be that the person was trying to fill in the gaps, just to feel like they were doing something, but then they started realizing, well, maybe substantially, fundamentally, they weren't really feeling the way they thought they would feel if they filled up their time with something.
I think sometimes people are overwhelmed because something surprises them, like a big change surprises them, and they just weren't mentally thinking about having to make a big change.
Yeah.
So, you know, like many times in our life, we see something coming. Like, okay, if you're graduating college, you kind of see, you know, you picture you're going to have a job or the job search or, you know, whatever it is, marriage, you see it coming down the road and you're mentally preparing. But let's say somebody loses a job or they're surprised by a divorce or you know, there's a death or, you know, just anything, you know, maybe they have to move, whatever, like it can be very sudden and surprising and they have not mentally prepared for it. And maybe their brain was already thinking, okay, I'm on this track and this is where I'm going to go. And they didn't leave the, you know, like they didn't leave room in there for those surprises that happen.
Yeah.
So it can be very overwhelming when that happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything else? Sorry, I just looked at the comments.
Oh yeah, Cynthia left too. Alhamdulillah. No, that's it. Alhamdulillah.
Okay. So let me go ahead and stop inshallah this recording.
Okay.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.